Absolutely. Thanks, Scott. Scott mentioned we go back about 10 years. It's been a while. It's probably been about 5, give or take, since we came in there for a while. 2015, 16, maybe into 17, we were coming up on an annual basis and just going over some of the GIS applications that we were using and how we were, leveraging those technologies to make geography-based decisions more so geared at, where do we want to build new stores and remodel stores, acquisitions, all that kind of stuff in the grocery industry. So just a quick agenda here. Take a couple minutes, give you a little personal bio intro. We'll hit a minute or two just on the company and location research department overview. I'm obviously with the Giant company. Most of you that are from the tri-state area here are probably pretty familiar with us, but give you a kind of a little bit better understanding of the company. A lot of people don't really realize how big of a company we are part of, so you might find that interesting. And then what we're going to do is I want to try to give you a really high level understanding of how we use geographical data to build strategic plans and ultimately build new stores, expand stores, acquire different competing units, so on and so forth. And really how it works is we start at extremely granular level data, household data, okay? So we call it micro level, and I'm going to show you an example of that. Obviously, there's a lot that we do. This is just a small tidbit, but a consumer spotting survey, and we actually do that for every single store that we have in our fleet. So that's kind of the first initial micro. It's down at the actual household level, and that little bonus card or the rewards program that you have on your app or your phone or your parents is super hypercritical. The amount of information that we gather off of that in terms of your consumer expenditure, your purchase habits, is really the foundation of what we do and allows us to make what we hope are good, smart business decisions. So we take that micro level data and then we actually take it to the macro level. Okay, so we go up to that 50,000 foot view. We call it strategic planning. The example I'm going to show you is white space analysis, and really what that is it's a market share gap analysis work. So where are we retaining market share, where are we getting the business from versus where we're not, and then how does that go into a build and how do we roll that out over our operating area to deploy our efforts in real estate development and even merchandising and operations to deepen that market share grab, that all important dollar. And then we bring it down to back down to the micro. So we go back down to, in essence, a single site market study. It might be a geography that we're looking for 2 or 3 units in, but it goes back down to the micro level. And then Scott had asked me to put together a slide or two on sustainability. He said that's a big thing with you guys and gals in the room here. I am by no means, I'll caveat it right off the get-go. I'm not an expert in it, but you can do a lot of reading on our website, aholdelhaize.com. Internationally, ESG is huge. Quick bio, my name is Brad Markle. I'm currently manager of real estate development for the Giant company. So, in essence, we're the guys responsible for identifying sites, building sites, acquisitions. Our team works hand in hand with developers through municipal approvals all the way up through the construction, overseeing the construction processes, and all the way up through grand opening. Then we kind of turn the keys over to the business at that point in time and wash our hands clean until we have landlord issues, maintenance issues, all that kind of stuff. But myself, I'm a 2001 graduate of Ship, so I'm a fellow alum. I've been with the company since April of 2002, so about 20, almost going on 21 years. Nearly all of my professional career, I've been in some sort of insights or analytical roles. The first 4 years of my career I spent in consumer insights. I graduated with a business marketing degree, so it's kind of a natural marriage. Spent about 4.5 years doing it and came across through some special project work and collaborative efforts this discipline of location research, and that falls within the real estate side of the business. Opportunity came in late 2005 to move out of consumer insights, which was under the marketing side of the business. and jumped ship. Went into the real estate side and spent 16 years doing location research for the company. In terms of the company overview, we're going to go in reverse order here. Start the giant company. We're a separate entity. We have about 192 stores, Pennsylvania, Maryland, Virginia, and West Virginia. Pretty good sized company. We have about 36,000 associates. That's inclusive of corporate staff and store level distribution centers. And surprising, we're an $8 billion organization here locally based out of Carlisle. So, out of those 192s, we're driving some pretty crazy store volume. Our average store does, give or take $650,000 a week in sales. We are the second most profitable brand in Ahold Delhaize USA's fleet of 2,000 stores. We run about a 5 to 5.5, 6% bottom line EBIT, which is above and beyond the grocery market standard. So we produce a lot of cash for the mother company here out of South Central PA. So we are part of Ahold Delhaize USA. That's the U.S. operating fleet or entity. Makes up about 2,000 stores. We have stores all the way from all on the eastern seaboard, all the way from Maine to Georgia, including the District of Columbia. The brands that we operate under are Hannaford. So if you're familiar with the Northeast Maine, they're based out of the Scarborough, Portland market. Hannaford Brothers, Stop & Shop out of the Quincy, Boston market, all the way down to New York and New Jersey. There we are with Giant Martin's Heirloom, Giant Landover, as I had mentioned earlier, and Food Line, based out of Salisbury, North Carolina, which is kind of the greater Charlotte market. So we merged with Food Line and Hannaford's parent company back in 2016, in which that was kind of the key focus of, I think, our last presentation, some of the collaborative work or and regulatory work we did with the Federal Trade Commission to get that deal done. So you roll it from the U.S. up to international. Our parent company is Ahold Delhaize, based out of Belgium and the Netherlands, Zaandam. Combined, we've got about 7,500 stores, 19 brands globally in the Netherlands, Belgium, Central and Southeastern Europe. Almost half a million associates. We serve about 55 million customers a week, and we're about an $80 billion organization. So kind of skipping back to the Ahold Delhaize USA to understand the scope or the size of the company, that $50 billion in sales puts us in about in the top 5 of pure play grocers in the country. So Walmart, Kroger, Albertsons, and Costco are typically the 4 that sit above us. Quick overview of the department mission statement is simply to direct ADUSA, Ahold Delhaize USA, strategic network development through the use of comprehensive and geospatial analysis. Strategies will be focused on optimizing, which is a key word. A lot of people get that confused with maximization or maximizing. Our goal is not to really maximize the capital performance or the return, the financial component. We want to optimize it. Maximizing, you can get yourself in a lot of trouble. So you can see we got 19 individuals in the department. I was part of this crew. Again, led the Carlisle and DC divisions for many, many years until I took this opportunity in retail development. We're led by Christian Orman. He's the director. He's based in North Carolina. And you can see we branch off into manager that are focused on exclusive geographies. So right now, Hannaford and Giant Carlisle run together, and Giant Landover and Stop & Shop run together. When we reorged in 2021, May of last year, we went union, non-union, just for single employer avoidance. It was an HR decision to do that. We have Ed Crosby over to the far left. Ed really heads our technology group. He also heads our competitive intelligence efforts. So, and then those teams are supported by a group of analysts underneath it. So altogether, 18 working folks, 19 with Christian. I don't consider Christian a working folk, so he's hat and sash. So Off to the right, you can see kind of the major work streams that we get into. There's a lot behind it: strategic planning, macro and micro market analysis, which we're going to talk a little bit further about today. A lot of demographic and psychographic analyses. I don't know how much you've gotten into that, but demographics are one thing. The psychographics are a whole nother animal. It kind of puts that psycho and attitudinal piece behind things, customer segmentation. We do a lot of work with that. Sales forecasting, that's really the ultimate job responsibility of this department. Any capital investment in the company of $2 million or more, this group does all the analysis and sales forecasting for us. So that top line performance, it's a super, super important number. Competitive intelligence tracking, and the group under Ed, Kyle Nicholas, who's actually a Shippensburg graduate, is the department kind of acts as the GIS central command for the organization. So kicking off this first micro level, right? I'd said we kind of go micro to macro, back to micro. This first micro product is what we call our CSS reports, or customer spotting surveys. And really what they are is they're quarterly releases of store sales and market data, all done at the individual store trade area level. So we are publishing 2,000, give or take, of these every single quarter. And they're used throughout the organization, predominantly, obviously, for us in real estate. It's super important because, as you'll see, it gives us the ability to understand market share performance. You know, where are we capturing, where are we not? It's also heavily used throughout merchandising and operations. They're putting together new branding strategies, marketing strategies, merchandising optimization, all off of this data. It is geared to an internal customer. This is data that doesn't leave the four walls, if you will, of our organization. It really helps us to answer these couple questions: customer and sales, where are they coming from? Competitors. Who's out there today? What's their performance? What's their market share grab? And what's happening tomorrow? So competitive activity, that competitive intelligence piece that I touched on. What are our competitors up to? Sales, remodels, other CapEx. Where are they opening? Where are they closing? And who are our primary customers? You'll see, you know what I mean, off of this RTA, which is relevant trade area. Ethnicity, income, distribution, customer segmentation, the demographic, the psychographics of it, really understanding who's out there, who's shopping the store, so we can continue to offer the right merchandise and the right services, to continue to grow. Simple little visual here. I mean, this is what I said earlier. It all starts with this right here. It all starts with the loyalty card. When we launched this in 1999, the amount of data and our capabilities of what we can do with this information is unbelievable. And I like to think that our company, I go to a lot of conferences, our company is leading edge in how we're leveraging. There's a lot of people that collect a lot of information and sit on it in a silo somewhere and don't really leverage. We spend a lot of time, money, and physical resources taking that information and putting it into what we call actionable insights, right? Bring it to the customer, bring it to the market. So really what we do is every time you scan that card, everything that you're buying, the dollar amount, the category of the product is all being collected here. Then simply what we do is we geocode it. That address that you supply us, we geocode it back down to the household level, and then we roll it up to the block group level, which I'm sure most of you are familiar with the hierarchy of geography. We look at everything at a block group level here. So if it's block data, household data, we aggregate it up and then assign it appropriately. So that's kind of a key process there, key understanding. I won't spend any time on this. You guys have a pretty good handle on it. It's the geography that everything's built off of. So the first thing we do is we develop what we call a RTA, relevant trade area. But really what we do is we identify where all the sales are coming from, all the card data for all the stores in our fleet, okay? And we can get really good insights and have a high level of confidence behind it, because on average, about 85 to 90% of our sales across the entire fleet are being captured on that card. Sales and transactions. So it's a sample base that we have a ton of confidence in. So what we do is we aggregate that up to the block group level, and then we define a trade area that explains on average 70 to 90% of that store sales. Some criteria for a block group to be included in an RTA. Really 3 criteria is, first one is if it's 65% of sales and accounts for at least 1% of total store sales, okay? Or statement 2, block group is part or top of the 65% of sales and makes at least 2% of the market share. And market share is defined by expenditure, population times PCW, which is per capita weekly expenditure, which is calculated for us for groceries specifically. And then the third is block group accounts for at least 1% of the store sales or 2% of the market share. Then we go through a cleansing exercise to make sure it's contiguous, because everybody, I mean, it just dilutes a lot of problems, a lot of questions. Yeah, go ahead.
Do you see competition within your parent company?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
Do you encourage that or try to combat it?
We try to combat it as much as possible. We call it cannibalization or cross shop. You know, obviously there always is. I can tell you for what we don't like to see is any more than about 20%. Okay. When we hit 20%, we're looking at consolidation strategies in the market, especially if we have marginal performers or underperformers. And actually, when I went to DC in 2015, because we had, and I don't want to get off course here, we had so many, we had had an evolving door of leadership, executive committee. Somebody wanted to build a neighborhood strategy. The next person wanted to come in and do super regional sites. And we just had this absolute, lack of a better term, just, shit pile of stores, and they're pulling all over the place. So one of the things I was tasked with was cleaning up. Let's get those boundaries, cleaned up. And we did actually a lot of consolidation, 2-for-1, down to, maybe an existing site or maybe a neutral site where we were going to do a grounds up and we were going to close 2 stores, merge that business. 3-for-1s, 3-for-2s. We did a lot of crazy stuff down there over the last 10 years, again, to get to that optimization, not maximizing store count. I mean, it's one of the things we're always fighting with leadership about. You know what I mean? The CEOs, they come in for a couple of years, they want to drive store count, market share, and it's like, wait, you got to hit the brakes here a little bit, because at the end of the day, if you dilute your own P&L, it's not good. So.
Is that why we saw like a lot of you would see some food lines stay, some giants go, or food lines go in this area kind of thing?
Yeah, what happened in this area, and I'm not sure the time frame that you're talking about, but when we did our international merger with Delhaize, we were Legacy Ahold. When we merged with them in 2016, there were a bunch of markets here in the United States that we had to divest for monopolistic and antitrust through the FTC, and I actually led those efforts. So some of the stuff that you saw in this area, where there was an operating food line and a giant and the food line closed, that's because we had to divest that as part of that. Huge impact down the I-81 corridor down through Virginia. We sold off a lot of food lines. We sold off close to 50 in total. So there's really 3 sections to the CSS report. And again, I'm not going to go through this eye chart, but I just want to get you a sense of the data that we're showing people and distributing it out. And section 1 is a lot of the store information in that RTA table, that relevant trade area, and we're busting it down to every single block group that is accompanied in there. So you're looking at things like customer counts, how many are there, how many household counts, what's your market share, what's the population, a lot of high-level demographics that go left to right there. So, and you can look at it in terms of percentages, dollars, means a lot to a lot of people depending on what your business use is for this information. So section 2 then takes that same RTA. Keep in mind, everything's based on this geography, but really hones in on competitive market share and demographics. So a couple of the different things we're looking at the top over there, store events, what's happening in the market, what's going on, what's the future, is there a new Costco coming in, is a Weiss closing, is a Weiss remodeling, Weiss expanding. We need to know that for future planning of new stores, as well as just our normal budget cycle. So finance uses these competitive impact budgets year-round for performance of store to set budgets. How many labor hours if anybody works in retail? They're using a lot of this information. If the store's going to get hit by 5%, store sales are going to go down. we lose leverage on a P&L. We're going to probably take some labor hours out of the store. So there's multiple uses. Pretty high level demographic screen. You can see there, population, household count, race, ethnicity, income, educational attainment, all kind of, the 8 to 10 critical variables that we like to look at. And then you can see market share. We look at market share on the whole polygon, whole RTA, but then we also break it down by drive time. And it varies by store, by urbanicity. Typically it's shown as a 5, 10, and 15. A typical grocery store in a typical suburban market, average trade area is about 7 or 8 minutes drive time. So if you think about that and how your family shops, or you or your spouse or siblings or whatever, it makes sense. Now, obviously, there's lots of things that go into physical barriers, whatnot. And then the bottom piece is grocery information. So, what's out there in the RTA, what are the competitive units, what are their sales volumes, sizes, and then we break some different things down. Case date, which means, when was that site last visited and field verified by our analyst team. And then we do some fair share analysis, to gauge who's overperforming and underperforming. And the third are the visuals. If you guys have been in GIS class here, we put them in visual format. We give them 3 views. Store sales, which are just that, the dollar value that each one of those block groups contributes to the total store sales. Market share, which is performance into potential, it's a percentage, and then percentage of store sales. So that's a little bit of a blush of a micro approach, okay? Now what we do is once we have all that information for strategic planning, we got to roll it up, right? So we're taking all that household level data at the block group, and now for all the single stores, and we're bringing it together for a chain-wide aggregate, okay? And then taking a 50,000-foot view of where are those pockets, where do we want to grow, where are the opportunities, who's there, so on and so forth. Then what we do is we look to see where are those pockets, okay? And where can we develop a contiguous strategy or a trade area that we can send teams into to study. We don't want islands of data and stuff like that. We look for that contiguous piece. And there's really 2 criteria that those contiguous geographies need to meet to satisfy our strategic interest, okay? And that is a current chain market share penetration of less than or equal to 15%. We start to see numbers above 15%, it gets to your point, cannibalization. And our mother company they want net new sales. They don't want a reallocation or trading of dollars. We have that and we tolerate it up to a 2% of sales in a given model. We can impact a sister store for up to 2% of its sales and not get penalized through the investment pro forma perspective. Outside of that, we do get penalized, and it's weighted very heavily in the financial. Because you got to keep in mind, the grocery industry, we're a small profit margin business, man. On average, we're running 3 to 4% at the bottom line. So every dollar you spend, it may seem a lot, but we're only taking about 3 to 4 cents actually to the bank at the end of the day across the industry. So then what we do is we have those areas identified, then we build the presentation deck, take it to the executives, and we do our best to really be all-inclusive here in terms of small formats, large formats, medium-sized formats, basically anything that's in our stable of formats. E-commerce is now part of that, and then what may be down the road. So, but we feel that this 15% and this $1 million really can be flexible to any format that we either have today or may develop in the future. Right now, the craze is, in the 90s and 2000s, it was big, right? We were building 65, 75,000 square foot stores. If you're from the Harrisburg market or Willow Grove out in Philadelphia, we have 90,000 square foot, like we call them hypermarkets. Really the craze is, we see a lot of movement, especially non-perishables, bulk paper, towels, water, all that kind of stuff is moving to the e-com channel. So, really the grocery industry is moving in a stage where maybe 15, 20 years from now, we're nothing more than a perishable depot of 20 to 25,000 square feet. Absolute hypothesis, but we're starting to see those trends. So really a lot of our focus now is not necessarily where do I build 60, 70,000 square foot stores? Where do I build, 35 to 50,000 square foot stores that are going to be heavily weighted to the perishable side of the business, which is the better profit margin, and allow our e-com partners to deliver the non-perishable lower profit margin. But that's a whole nother dissertation that I come back and give you on that side of the business. So you can see here in the black box, text box, those are all stores that we have actually brought to the market since 2016, 2017. So it's just, you can see their open years there. And then the pink are ones that are still in planning. These two, this is a small market. This is going to be a large format mixed use development. If you're familiar with Philadelphia, Broad Street runs north and south. Broad Street Bad Boys, if you're hockey fans. Takes you the whole way down to the sports complex. This is at Broad in Washington, which is like kind of the main intersection on the south side of Philadelphia proper. That store is under construction. Anticipated delivery is 2024, probably late Q3 or quarter 4. So that's your macro. So we went micro to macro. Now we're going to go back down to micro, either a single site or a multi-site screen and evaluation. And we do that for evaluation and validation. We're searching for needles in haystacks every single time. And again, because of that low profit margin, we cannot afford to be wrong. If we open a turd of a store, it hurts, and it hurts for a long time. And do we have some? Yeah. I mean, if you don't, you're not being aggressive enough. But we don't like to see too many of them. So we've got a very, very intensive process to try to avoid, explain as much of uncertainty as we can and mitigate as much risk as we can without being too overly concerted. So what do we do after we identify the areas? What we do is then the location research team is physically deployed to that geography. One of the things that our company is super proud on is that we still, for our primary data collection, we go to the market, boots on the ground research. So these guys are visiting every competitive unit, every site. They're driving the trade areas. They're validating, all of our pretty tech systems with drive time analyses and TomTom data and all that good stuff. Again, because we cannot afford to make a mistake. So we spend a lot of time on research. I mean, we have a team of 18 people that do this for us, and they're highly seasoned, they're highly talented people. So when we get people in, we keep them. We have to, because we can't be sending some Joe Schmo out there to make a recommendation of building a store. There's just too much at weight on it, and they're highly trained. They're highly trained across all aspects of the business, not just real estate, not just geography. They're trained in retail operations. A lot of them have operations backgrounds, and if you don't have it, we will put you through an operations training program. When I joined the company, or when I joined Location Research back in 2005, I didn't have operations experience. I spent 6 months doing an abbreviated store management training program, learning every aspect of how to run a supermarket, because I was going to be deployed into the markets. I got to evaluate these things. So we send these folks to the market. It's called casing the market. Really, there's 3 things that they're primarily assigned to do. The first is trade area delineation, right? And I know some of people that have come in here, I know Bill Schrader came in and talked about, I used to work with Bill, and I still have a great relationship with Bill. Whatever he told you about trade area delineation, forget about it, just listen to how I do it, because I did it for him. So, he was the deal maker, I was the research guy. So, but no, that's very important, because that's the establishment of the potential. That's your pie, right? So these guys are out, and gals are out driving the markets. They're understanding the road networks, barriers, huge. Physical, socioeconomical, emotional barriers. Is it demographically, is it psychographically driven? We got to understand all that. Drive time analyses, and really I sum it up and explain it to people as, really the job is to put your consumer hat on, Sociology at its core, right? Sociology 101. for the weeks that you're out there, you're going to spend time away from your family and everything. Lose yourself in the market. You have to become one with the market and understand that if you're a consumer living in that area, how are you getting around? What things are influencing you to make your purchase decision, or where you're making your purchase decision? And then competition, big piece, right? You got your potential, now you got your performance piece. Things that they're collecting, existing size, sales performance, location type, facility, operations evaluation, CapEx plans. Big part is we want to understand what's going on in the future, because we get a site approved. In all likelihood, we're not opening for 3 to 4 years. So we gotta have a baseline or an understanding, and we try to scratch and sniff and uncover as much as what we can. We buy a lot of data. There's companies out there that do nothing but web scraping, or they work with municipalities. We purchase a lot of that data, but then we put it to use and validation by the boots on the ground. So we're picking up a lot through dialogue with competition. We're in a Weiss. You're talking to a department manager. What's anything going on? In the market. Also, obviously, municipal planning departments. That's a staple visit when we're out. What's coming through? What are you hearing? And then we also leverage a lot of our relationships through developers, brokers that we have on the real estate development side. Those guys are usually well versed in understanding what's going on. So, and then the last is target site evaluation. If we're looking at a new store, what are the physical attributes of the site? Or the shopping center, if it's a takeover, or is it raw dirt? What's the overall positioning in the market? Access, visibility, ingress, egress, how you get in and out of the site if it's built out already. Is it a hard corner, soft corner, mid-block location type? Physical attributes that Scott and maybe you guys have talked about when looking at some of this stuff. Again, it's a long process. In this area, it's a little bit easier. We used to joke around, Carlisle could get new stores a lot quicker than I could down in DC. Well, it's pretty easy when you're building supermarkets in cornfields, right? Instead of having to take out city blocks and do mixed use vertical with retail on the bottom, and we got resi on the top, and you might have 200 units up above you, it gets very complex and complicated very quick. So just I'm going to run through a quick market study. We really skinny down what we show to the executives. They're like kindergartners. They lose attention very quickly. So our typical, it's kind of crazy, right? I mean, you think about, we're asking for a $40 or $50 million commitment, and we walk in there with usually about a 15 to 20 page deck that is just the key information. You know what I mean? Tell me what time it is. I don't need to know how the watch works. They, again, with our level of experience and number of years, they trust us. We've got street cred. So if we're bringing a project, that's already a big win already. So, but just to kind of give you a scope of what we would walk the executive team through, we always start with a high-level operating area map. Believe it or not, some of them have no idea what you're talking about, especially over the last 10 years where we've had kind of an evolving door of executive members, which we start them all with an operating area map, then we drive it down to what we have identified as the study area, we call it. So that black polygon was generated by the analyst that went and did the boots on the ground research. And that study area is our world. That's the potential, that's the competitive set, the existing performance, that's what we have to understand, and we have to make the project successful based on this little universe here. So what you see here is a chain aggregate that we talked about. So all the stores that are doing business within these block groups, it's all aggregated. And you can see here on the legend, white space. That 15% less market share saturation, which is ripe for a net new initiative for the company, assuming there's enough population and potential there. Then we show them the spotting map. Spotting map is basically just a second-gen map of that. This is where the rubber meets the road, the dollars. And then we go into the forecast. So again, we keep it very simple. In this particular case, we were looking at a 50,000 square foot total area store, about 37,000 on the sales floor. Had a year one projected sales of 525. We always project 1 year out of estimated opening, so it's a 52-week initial operating cycle. Then we do an 8-year projection, so we take that 525, and then again, based upon historical analogs, we grow sales. Then we show them a comp map. Again, this is the results of that analyst going to the market. He or she visited every one of those stores, evaluated the operations, gathered whatever intelligence they could to get to the size and the sales. And then what we do is we take the gravity model, and the gravity model will actually produce a dollar forecast at the block group level. What we do then is we build a thematic map off of those dollars so they can see the decay and the disbursement of the dollars. Again, it's another credibility check. We don't get a whole lot of questions because of our history of success, but this map comes into play, and it's pretty important actually for our marketing teams. As we're gearing up to open the store, they're studying these geographies because they can take these block groups and correlate them into zip codes for media perspective. So where are you going to spend in terms of your mass merchandising or mass marketing efforts leading up to the opening of a store? Last piece here, again, Scott had mentioned sustainability, ESG. I will again caveat, I'm certainly not an expert on all this area. I would point you, I'll do whatever I can as far as questions, but I would point you to aholdelhais.com. If you look at our annual reports, there is granular breakdown of all of our sustainability and ESG efforts. But what I wanted to do was just kind of give you an idea, and these are our international buckets at the global level of kind of how we see and what we're doing in terms of environmental, social, and governance. So in environmental, a lot of climate activity, waste elimination, deforestation, and conversion, animal welfare, a lot of debates out there with GMO products and engineered foods. Do we partake, do we not? If they are on the shelf, how do we label them? How do we educate the consumer so they know exactly, what they're getting? Biodiversity, sustainable sourcing, and agriculture. Very active on the social aspect. In fact, this year for the Giant brand here locally, you're going to see a lot of marketing and support through healthy living and how we as a supermarket play a critical role, or how we feel we play a critical role in delivering to you healthy options. Now, what you're probably going to ask me is, then why do you have all that damn candy at the checkout stands? I don't know. Like I said, that's where I'll say I'm not an expert. Very active in Philadelphia right now as we continue to build out that strategy that I showed you, Phil Abundance, doing a lot of things in terms of education down there. And then governance, product safety and sustainability, DEI, data privacy, responsible tax, corporate structure, making sure, are we demographically representative on our highest level boards of our shoppers, and crisis management, which is big, especially down in the Carolinas, hurricanes, that kind of stuff. Food Lion does a lot of that, as well as Hannaford up in the Northeast with winter storms and so on and so forth. So again, not meant to go into super detail here, just meant to give you a little flavor and potentially generate any questions, and I'll do my best to answer anything. So
I'm Jordan, nice to meet you.
Jordan, nice to meet you.
So a few weeks ago, Steph Robinson spoke to our class, and she is the Senior Manager of Real Estate Strategy for Panera Bread. She mentioned that when evaluating the trade area potential of a new Panera Bread location, they look at 4 key activity generators: residential neighborhoods, daytime workers, existing retail, and other being things like proximity to colleges, hospitals, and sports arenas. How does Panera's process relate to or differ to the process at Giant?
Well, not knowing their process, it sounds like it's very similar. So, they're studying geographies, they're studying variables that are impacting the geography that they're looking at, right? So it sounds like they're understanding the road networks, they're delineating trade areas. That's the core, right? You have to establish a potential statistics. You have to understand the pie and then what you get out of it. So it sounds like that if they have a couple, key drivers, that correlate heavily to store success. We do as well, but we are a mainstream grocer. So we're not a Whole Foods, for example, or a Trader Joe's, or some of the H&O guys, Mom's Organic out of Rockville, Maryland, Sprouts Markets, some of those formats that are more geared to a certain demographic or psychographic. We appeal to all. So it's a lot more general that we're looking at. We're looking at all those physical attributes of real estate within the trade area, those barriers, those road networks that I talked about, and then define competition, what we feel that we can impact. And that's really what the pie is.
You guys have a list?
So one of the other things.
So you got to tell me your name first.
Oh, I'm sorry. Hi, I'm Jack. One of the other things that Steph touched on was that Panera prefers to situate themselves near big box stores or daily needs stores.
Yep.
For instance, the giant in my hometown is an anchor for Papa John's, actually a pet store, but
Giant in your hometown?
Gettysburg.
Gettysburg. Okay. Yep. 267. Yep. Yep.
So I have sort of three related questions on that, which are like, what stores does Giant prefer to work with? Do its potential neighbors affect the site selection process? And how does Giant measure the benefit from these neighbors?
Yeah. We're a little bit more of the inverse of that, okay? And really, a Panera Bread type of operation benefits from foot traffic that is really driven by other retail. We are the traffic generator. And I don't say that arrogantly. Do we absolutely take into consideration retail hubs, where's the concentration, where's the density in the market? Absolutely. That's part of that market positioning that we talked about. Ideally, we want to be there. Is it favorable to do that? Yeah, but if the market doesn't call for it, with our brand equity, we have no problem going standalone if we feel it's the right site. And that's the beauty of the boots on the ground research and the gravity model. That's really where we rely on the gravity model and the skill sets that our team has, being masters of that gravity model and the data inputs that go into it. So it's kind of, I'm not cheaping out on an answer there, but we go both ways. For instance, a lot of times, even when we're looking at power centers with, a Lowe's or a Home Depot or a Target, those retailers won't make a decision until we make a decision. And then if the landlord or the developer lands the supermarket, everything else falls into place. That's why, like, if I were to show you one of our leases and the restrictive languages and stuff that we put in, we drive the development for the most part, and that's even more so than a Target. Because you figure, we're looking at generating on average, $550,000 to $700,000 a week for a large scale prototype store. Okay, at $30 to $35 average order size, which is typical. It's a little bit higher right now with the inordinate inflation that's in the market. It's 20,000 trips a week coming into our box. So, the Paneras, that would be on an out parcel or an out pad of one of our developments, they absolutely have a little bit different way of judging that. Traffic counts are, large, are usually very important to C-stores and operators like that. We like traffic counts, but again, we're confident that we can, drive those types of sales and the foot traffic even without that. If we have it, great.
I'm Cydeny.
Hi, Cydeny.
My question is, in your 20 years of experience in the food industry, what changes have you witnessed regarding the shipping and distribution of fresh produce? For example, how does geography and the change in seasons in the northern part of the country affect where your produce comes from? And does your inventory differ in a grocery store that is rural versus an urban region location?
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly more of a merchandising question. I'll do my best to answer it just on my 20 years working in consumer and whatnot. We like to buy local. I mean, obviously, you know, that's not always possible, but especially like in summer seasonal fruits, that kind of stuff. We pride ourselves on that. You know, often when you go into our stores, we're touting it, you know, either through shelf tags or some sort of recognition that, you know, these strawberries are coming from X farm or whatever it may be. Certainly seasonal components, you know, come in and out of the produce and fresh sections, as well as the demography and the psychographics of trade areas. I mean, and that's why we spend a lot of time understanding who that consumer is. I mean, if you get into Hispanic areas, that produce department is going to look different, and the meat department is going to look different than you know, a 90% Caucasian suburban or rural trade area. So and then the beauty of it is, go back to that forecast allocation map that I showed you. When those discussion points are happening with our executive team or our top merchants, you know, we can quantitatively show them how important that block group or cluster of block groups are of maybe that Hispanic shopper or, you know, African American shopper, Caucasian shopper, Asian shopper is to the success of what we feel the store will be at.
My question was just, what steps do you see Giant taking to become a more sustainable company? And like as an example, I just saw like getting rid of plastic bags, more sustainable packaging.
Yeah.
So I guess like you touched on it a little bit. Is there anything that you know that's like in the pipeline coming up?
Yeah, I'll kind of speak to what I probably have the most interaction with, and that's some of the climate stuff. So, you know, net zero efforts in terms of carbon emissions. So we're doing a lot as far as, you know, using different types of refrigerants that are lower emission. We're evaluating right now actually taking all the natural gas out of our stores and converting like bake ovens and that kind of stuff to electricity. So, you know, a lot of that is going on within the store design, which I have a little bit more exposure and knowledge of. So we have an ambition to be net zero in terms of CO2 by 2040.
So I'm Dakota. You already touched on this a little bit, but our last guest speaker helped us to understand the concept of store cannibalization.
Mhm.
For example, she said Panera's biggest competitor is another Panera. When it comes to Giant, Martin's, and other grocery stores, how does Giant consider or take into account store cannibalization?
Yeah, well, as you can see, as I showed you on the market, it's very important to us to understand. So the card data, you know, that feeds into the CSS reports, we're also feeding that into our gravity model at the block group level. So we know our customers better than anybody, so it's hugely important to us and is degrading to the pro forma. So sister cannibalization is a big topic. So that's why when I talked about the white space, that 15% threshold, you know, 15% or less is really what we look at as kind of fertile hunting grounds as far as net new stores go. And really because after you get that 15%, you start to see that cannibalization. Or cross shop, as you had asked earlier. Yep.
All right, for our last question, my name is Mavis. So over the course of our semester, we've come to understand that the pandemic, the third-party delivery services, and getting access to customers' cell phone data and GIS,
Yep.
they've all been things reshaping retail landscapes and promoting companies to reevaluate their site location strategies. So would you be able to describe some of the shocks that have disrupted or have not disrupted Giant site location strategies?
One of the
Just
what?
shocks, like I said, the pandemic or
Yeah.
third-party delivery services.
Yeah, well, first, you're referencing mobility data. You know, and I didn't touch on it in this presentation, you know, we're players in that space as well. We do leverage our internal data because it's so robust, our loyalty card data, but we use mobility data to understand trip generation, trip journeys of our competitors, because we obviously don't have their loyalty card data, so it's the next best thing. The limitation with mobility data is a lot of it is missing the expenditure piece. So how do you convert that trip, and what does it mean in terms of dollars? Even if that device is riding idle in a store for 45 minutes, what's that mean? A lot of companies out there trying to do correlations to it.
Can you unpack that a little bit?
What's that?
I think you're here on that. Can you unravel that part a little bit? What do you mean by tracking mobility? Are you geofencing your competitors and
Yeah.
watching your cars
Yes.
walk into
Yep.
their stores?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
That's what I meant.
Yeah, absolutely. So we would geofence, whatever we feel is appropriate, whether or not it's the brick and mortar four walls of the store. Do you take into parking lots? You might be wanting to understand e-commerce. Walmart, typically has curbside pickup on the sides of their stores. So if you understand where those spaces are, you can geospace or geofence those spaces to look at trips coming in and out. I think to address the second part of that, disruptors, distractions, obviously the pandemic was insane. You see the repercussions of it still. Shopping patterns have dramatically changed. I think it's given supermarkets an opportunity to, again, connect with their customer, because we developed a term internally. What we saw is a lot of budding chefs. Because really the industry that got completely crushed was QSR, right? You know what I mean? They were shutting down. A lot of restaurants struggled. A lot of those sales, food away from home, as we consider it, came back to food at home. And we've been trying to really leverage, and I mentioned earlier, one of our initiatives this year is to connect with the consumer in terms of healthy living. You know what I mean? What can we do for you? So that's a big opportunity. Supply chain's a mess, just with everything. And to couple, the pandemic and its direct and indirect impact on supply chain throughout the entire globe, but us particularly, we couldn't have picked a worse time to move from a wholesale model to a self-distribution model. So by 2023, we will be self-distributing all product to our stores. Typically in the past, we've relied on third parties like a CNS wholesaler, especially for non-perishable goods. So in the midst of the pandemic, in the midst of supply chain strains already, we're undergoing a monumental shift in our business model to become more reliant on self-distribution. And once we get there, it'll be great, but it's been very, very painful of a process. That's why you see, and I'm not defending our operations teams, but you go into a lot of local Weisses, you go into a lot of local Walmarts and Targets, and you go into a lot of local Giants. Our in-stock position has been inferior to a lot of those. One has been the supply chain, the global supply chain, but some of our own issues and pains of going to self-distribution. But again, it's a long-term approach because it adds about 3 to 4% baseline basis points back onto our P&L once we get to an efficient state. So they're looking long-term. We're hoping to be up and running by 2023, 2024. Does that answer your question? Somewhat answer your question? Yeah. A lot of companies, mobility data is huge right now, and there's a lot of companies out there that are doing great things, but there are limitations, to it. So.
Well, that's our official list. Are there any, I know some of you have questions that you asked that didn't get picked. Have a chance. Yeah, Ryan.
So I know not all Giant stores have a gas station.
Yep.
What designates a store to have one, and do you guys actually make money off that, or is that just an incentive for someone to have a loyalty card?
It's penny profit. It's more of a competitive weapon in terms of value image.
Okay.
So the gas stations grew to what they are now. We have about 115-ish of our 192 stores have gas stations, give or take. It was a huge driver in the late 90s, in the early portion of the 2000s, when we saw aggressive expansion of Walmart. in our footprint, and not that Walmart wasn't here, but they were taking their Division I mass merchandising stores and converting them to super centers, which was much more of an imminent threat to us. So our leadership at the time were like, wherever we could get gas, we put it in. Growth of gas has significantly slowed. We still will put it in certain sites, and kind of the Panera model, we were looking at traffic counts. We're becoming more of a C-store operator when we're looking at fuel, as opposed to, you know, how does it complement the value proposition from a merchandising standpoint. We're also getting into EV, obviously, with electric vehicles. We have a partnership with a company called Volta, and we're rolling that out. We have Volta in 72 or 73 locations of our fleet right now. So that's a space that we're playing with. The challenge with that is the Volta is the way that they make their money is through ads. Okay, so they want their EV stations right up in prime parking spaces at the front of our stores. And if you shop a store that has Volta in it right now, you'll see two slow DC chargers basically right in the heart of prime parking spaces. What we're finding out is that there's been a lot of customer pushback. In fact, we just led an entire study across our entire fleet. Is when you pull into a Giant, right now about 30 to 35% of our primary parking spaces, which we identify on average as like 8 trees of parking across the front of the store and 8 spaces deep, 35% of those spaces are tied up for some sort of designation, whether it be Giant Direct or e-com pickup, not handicap because that's completely separate, but you know, teammate of the month, teammate of the year, you know, parents with kids, you know, veterans, you know, and it's becoming a real business question of how do we maybe make some changes to that.
Well, I think that's all the time we have for today, so please everyone give Bradley.
Thank you.